Hello, I hope this story will grab you from the first minute. It's about trust, betrayal, and the fight for justice. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Henry has always prided himself on living an honest life and being careful with his money. After 40 years of working in an auto repair shop, he retired feeling that he had secured a quiet life. But one day everything changed. The morning began as usual. Henry was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a newspaper. Suddenly, the phone rang. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter," said an official voice. "We're calling from the bank. Are you aware that your loan payment is overdue?" "A loan? What loan?" Henry frowned. The operator explained that a few months ago he had taken out a loan in his name for $120,000. This must be a mistake," Henry said, trying to remain calm. "I've never taken out a loan. We have the contract you signed and all the documents," the operator insisted. Henry hung up the phone, his hands shaking. The first thing Henry did was go to the drawer where he kept his documents. But the folder with copies of his ID and statements was missing. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. His heart started to race. He remembered that a few months ago he had given his documents to his son-in-law Derek, who had said he needed them for a little legal thing. Henry dialed his son-in-law's number. "Hello, Derek. It's Henry. I need to talk to you about something very important," he began. "Henry, I'm busy right now," Derek replied quickly. "Let's talk later." No, we need to talk now." Henry raised his voice. The bank said that there is a loan in my name. Do you know anything about it?" Derek fell silent. Henry, it's a long story," he finally said. "Let's meet later and I'll explain everything." And after that conversation, Henry felt his heart clench with fear. Could he really have done this? He thought. Henry called his daughter Alice to see if she knew anything. "Dad, I haven't heard anything about it," she said, "but I'll talk to Derek." Henry decided to go to the bank in person to see the documents. The manager showed him a copy of the contract, and it was indeed his signature. "Abakana? That's impossible," Henry said. "I didn't sign that." "But your documents and signature match," the manager insisted. Henry returned home, his mind racing. He knew that the next time he saw Derek, he would demand the truth. Henry returned home from his visit to the bank feeling anger and fear mixing inside. It was hard for him to imagine that someone he trusted could use his documents to commit fraud. To get to the bottom of the situation, he decided to get a deeper understanding of what was going on around him. Henry is a retired man who has worked as a mechanic in a small car repair shop all his life. He is used to being responsible and foresighted. Losing control of his finances was not only a blow to him, but also a personal defeat. Alice, Henry's 35-year-old daughter, works as a nurse. She has always been on her father's side and supported him after her mother's death. She loves her husband Derek, but sometimes doubts his reliability. Derek, Alice's husband, works in real estate. He is often involved in risky transactions and convinces others that he has everything under control. His confidence and charm often help him avoid direct confrontations. Martha is Henry's neighbor who knows all the local gossip. She has a sharp mind and the ability to notice things that others ignore. Henry decided to talk to Elise again. "Dad, I asked Derek about the loan," she said when she got to his house. "And what did he say?" Henry asked. "He assured me that it was a misunderstanding," Alice replied. Henry looked at her in disbelief. "Alice, I saw the documents at the bank. My signature is on them." "But I didn't sign anything." Alice looked down. Dad, do you think Derek is hiding something?" "I don't want to think so, but the facts speak for themselves," Henry said. Alice thought about it. "Maybe this is a mistake. Let me talk to him again." That afternoon, Henry decided to talk to his neighbor Martha. What's wrong?" "Henry, you look worried," she asked when he walked into her house. Henry briefly explained the situation. "My son-in-law," Martha asked again. I always thought he was a slippery. What do you mean? Henry asked. He always talks a lot, but doesn't do much. I've heard of several of his real estate deals falling through. These words made Henry think even more. If Derek was in financial trouble, could he use Henry's trust to save himself? Henry decided not to wait for an explanation from Derek. He called his lawyer to get advice on how to proceed. And I have to find out the truth, even if it hurts, he told himself. Henry decided not to wait for Derek to explain himself. He realized that he had to take control of the situation. Sitting in the kitchen with a notebook and pen, Henry began to plan his actions. The first step was to contact a lawyer. Henry made an appointment and briefly outlined the problem. I need to understand how this happened, he said. The lawyer listened carefully and explained, if the signature on the documents is really yours, it complicates the situation. But we can start by checking who had access to your documents. Henry recalled how he had given his documents to Derek a few months ago. Maybe that's where the key lies, the lawyer said. Henry went back to the bank to get copies of the contracts and loan details. The manager wasn't very friendly, but he provided the documents he needed. You have the right to request a report on the use of your credit history, the manager said. Henry took the documents and went home to study them carefully. Sitting at the kitchen table, Henry carefully reviewed the copies of the contracts. He noticed that the signature on some of the documents looked strange. It's not really my handwriting, he thought. He also noticed the addresses that were listed for communication. One of them did not match his own address. What is this place? Henry wondered. Henry decided to talk to his daughter again. Alice, I found something interesting, he said, showing her the documents. Do you know why there's a different address here? Alice looked confused. No, Dad, I don't know anything about that, she replied. But you know that your husband took my papers? Henry asked. Alice looked down. Yes, he said it was for some kind of deal. I thought you knew about it. Alice's words only strengthened Henry's suspicions. He began to realize that Derek might have used his trust to solve his financial problems. Henry shared his thoughts with Martha. You need to find out more about this address, she said. I know how to do it. Martha offered to use her contacts to find out who the address belonged to. The next day, Martha brought the news. It's connected to a real estate company, she said, and it seems your son-in-law is involved. Henry felt his heart clench. I have to talk to Derek, he said. Henry decided it was time to demand an explanation. He called Derek and said, we will meet tomorrow and you will tell me everything. Otherwise, I'll go to the police. The day came when Henry could finally demand an explanation from his son-in-law. His patience had run out, and now he only wanted the truth. But what he learned exceeded his worst fears. Henry invited Derek to his house. Derek looked a little nervous, but he tried to hide it behind his usual self-assurance. So, Henry, what do you want to talk about? He began, sitting down at the table. Henry put copies of the documents from the bank in front of him. Do you know what these are? He asked. Derek took a quick glance at the papers, and his face turned pale. Look, it's not what you think, he began. Then explain it, Henry replied sharply. After a few seconds of tense silence, Derek began to speaking. Why, yes, I took out a loan in your name. But it was a temporary measure. I thought I could pay it back quickly. A temporary measure. Henry exclaimed. You've ruined my financial future. Derek tried to justify himself. I was having business problems. I couldn't get a loan for myself, so I thought this was the best option. The best option? For whom? For you. Henry raised his voice. You didn't even think about how this would affect me. Derek tried to calm him down. I was going to pay you back, but things didn't go as I had planned. Henry started to find out more. It turned out that Derek had made several bad real estate deals and owed large sums of money. When he was denied his own loan, he decided to take advantage of Henry's trust. Do you realize what you've done? Henry said, trying to control himself. I know I made a mistake, Derek said, but I'm asking you to give me time. I'll find a way to pay you back. A time. Henry smiled bitterly. You've already wasted my time, my money, and my trust. After Derek left, Henry called his daughter. Did you know about this? He asked. No, Dad, I didn't know anything, Alice replied, her voice trembling. Then you better start asking your husband, Henry said, because I'm not going to let him drag me into this any further. The next day, Henry met with his lawyer and told him about Derek's confession. This is a serious offense, the lawyer said. We can file a police report, but that could complicate your relationship with your family. My relationships are already ruined, Henry replied. I just want my life back. Henry returned home determined to fight for justice. He was not going to stay silent any longer. Henry could not calm down after his conversation with Derek. With every passing minute, his desire to understand the situation only grew stronger. He decided not to wait and start his own investigation, even if it meant facing even more painful facts. The first thing Henry decided to do was to check the old papers and records he kept in his closet. There might have been clues that would help him understand how Derek had gained access to his financial documents. He found an old box of documents he hadn't opened in years. Maybe there's something in here, he muttered as he pulled out the papers. Among the documents, Henry found a copy of an old agreement that Derek had once signed. The document had the same details as the loan agreement. This is impossible, Henry said, looking at the paper. A detailed review of the agreement showed that Derek had used a similar scheme in the past, but that the situation had not reached serious consequences. Henry shared his discovery with his neighbor Martha. Look, it's the same data as the loan, he said, showing her the document. Martha looked at the papers carefully. This seems to confirm that this isn't the first time Derek has used your information, she said. He just hasn't gotten into trouble before. Then, why didn't I notice? Henry asked. Because you trusted him, Martha replied. Henry decided to take a close look at his bank statements from the past few months. With the help of his lawyer, he was able to access the transactions related to the loan. That's strange, the lawyer said as he looked over the statements. Some of the money went into an account that doesn't belong to you or Derek. What is that account? Henry asked. We can find out, the lawyer replied. A few days later, the lawyer told Henry that the account belonged to a company that was involved in questionable financial transactions. That explains why the money disappeared so quickly, the lawyer said. Gersq could have been working with someone to pass the buck to you. This news shocked Henry. Now he knew it was much more serious than just a debt. He didn't just take advantage of my trust, Henry said. He got me into something very dangerous. Henry decided to talk to his daughter again. Alice, you need to know that Derek got me into something more than just a loan, he said. What do you mean? She asked, looking scared. He's been working with some shady companies, Henry replied, and that could have serious consequences for both of us. Alice didn't know what to say. Henry was left alone with his thoughts. He knew he had only revealed part of the truth, but he now had evidence that could change the course of the case. Henry was ready to have a serious conversation with Alice. He realized that the truth about Derek's machinations could put her in a very uncomfortable position, but he could not keep silent any longer. This conversation was going to solve everything. Alice arrived at Henry's house looking wary. Dad, you wanted to talk, she asked, sitting down at the table. Yes, and I want you to hear me out, Henry began. He put the documents in front of her that confirmed Derek's fraud. This isn't just a loan. This is fraud, he said. Alice looked at the papers carefully, and her face changed. You think Derek did this? She asked, trying to hide her confusion. Alice, it's obvious, Henry replied. He had access to my documents and the money went to a dubious account. Alice looked down, Dad, I didn't know about this, she said. You didn't know anything. Ella, Henry's voice rose. How could you not see that your husband was putting our family in debt? Alice burst into tears. I knew he was having money problems, she admitted, but I thought he was managing. He said he had it under control. Alice, you have to realize that Derek used me, Henry said, and if we don't act, it will destroy everything. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to go to the police, Henry answered firmly. Alice grabbed his arm. Daddy, please don't do this, she begged. If you go to the police, it will destroy our family. Alice, our family is already destroyed because of his lies, Henry replied. Alice was silent for a long time, then saying, I'll talk to Derek. We will find a way to pay off the debt, but please give us some time. A time. Henry smiled bitterly. Do you think that will be enough to fix everything? The Henry stood up and walked over to the window, looking out over his yard. I didn't want it to end up like this, he said, but I can't keep quiet anymore. Alice walked over to him and put her hand on his shoulder. Dad, I understand you, she said, but I also ask you to understand me. Henry stood silently, feeling bitter and sad. He loved his daughter, but he also knew he had to protect himself. Henry was at a crossroads. He knew that going to the police might be the only way to recover the money he had lost and protect his name. But he also realized that doing so would forever change his relationship with his daughter and create even more division in the family. That evening, Henry sat in his chair, holding an old photograph of his family. The picture was of him, Alice, and her mother. It reminded him of a time when his family had been his greatest pride. What happened to us? He whispered. He remembered talking to his lawyer, who had advised him to act immediately. But thoughts of how it would affect Alice stopped him. Alice arrived the next day. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept all night. Dad, I talked to Derek, she said. And what did he say? Henry asked, trying to hide his anger. He admits his guilt, Alice replied, but he wants time to make it right. Time, Henry repeated. He had time. And what did he do with it? Alice came closer. Dad, I know you're disappointed, she said, but if you go to the police, it will ruin not only his life, but mine as well. Alice, I've already lost everything I have, Henry replied. Now you're asking me to lose my dignity. That evening, Henry went to his neighbor Martha's house to get some advice. What do you think about all this? He asked. It's a tough choice, Martha replied. But I know one thing, if you don't protect yourself, no one else will. What if it destroys my relationship with my daughter? He asked. Henry, sometimes the truth is more important than relationships, she said. When Henry got home, he sat in silence for a long time. He remembered how he had worked for years to provide for his family. He wanted to believe that it was not all in vain. I have to make a decision, he told himself. The next day, Henry gathered Alice and Derek at his house. I've made a decision, he said, looking them in the eye. Alice looked worried and Derek tried to remain calm. I'm going to the police, Henry said firmly, Dad. Alice began, but Henry held up a hand to stop her. Alice, I love you, he said. But love doesn't mean I have to let you abuse me. Henry knew that this decision would have consequences, but for the first time in a long time, he felt in control of his life. After making the difficult decision to go to the police, Henry felt devastated, but also strangely relieved. He knew that this step would not bring back the money and trust he had lost, but it was the only way to stop what was happening. The police launched an investigation into Derek's actions. It turned out that this was not the first time he had committed fraud. His ties to suspicious companies and financial fraud had attracted the attention of law enforcement. It's only a matter of time, said Henry's lawyer, before your case is reviewed and you are likely to be recognized as a victim. Henry realized that this was a long process, but he felt a little calmer. The Alice did not get in touch for a long time after the conversation at Henry's house, but a few days later, she came in looking tired and depressed. Dad, I know you did what you thought was right, she said, but this is very hard for me. Alice, I didn't want it to happen this way, Henry replied, but I couldn't keep quiet any longer. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. I just want you to know that I will always love you, she said. Martha went to see Henry to see how he was doing. You made the right choice, she said, sitting down next to him. But I lost my relationship with my daughter, Henry replied. If your love is strong, it will endure, Martha said. Sometimes the truth is more important than temporary comfort. Henry decided not to dwell on the past. He started attending a local senior center where he met other people who were also facing financial difficulties due to family conflicts. We all have our stories, said one of the men, but it's how we move forward that matters. These meetings inspired Henry to start helping others avoid making the same mistakes. One evening, Henry received a call from Alice. Dad, I want you to know that Derek and I broke up, she said. Henry felt his heart sink. I'm sorry things ended up like this, he replied. It's not your fault, Alice said. I realized I couldn't stay with a man who betrayed our family like that. Henry stood on the doorstep of his house, looking at the sunset. His life was far from what he had envisioned, but he knew had done everything he could. This is just the beginning, he told himself. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. What would you do if you were Henry?